Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe here from my co-host Dan.
Hello and greetings.
And today we're continuing our Dragonlance podcast. At long last, we are finished this part of the podcast before we move on at some point to Dragons of Winter Night, which, yay, I guess. That aside, let's just get to finishing this novel. Caramon and some of the other men have to dress up as women, which is itself a little humorous, and has mythological precedence in the Thor myth, where Thor dresses up as Freya. Just as it's funny in the Norse myth, it's funny here. I'm sorry, I should not be so amused. Sturm gets threatened with the grave punishment of shaving, which he objects to. How dare they try to do that to a Salamnic knight? Don't they realize the importance of a knight's mustaches? And I like how he just scares them off when he roars. The ladies, I mean. It's pretty funny. That said, Raistlin prefers to stay behind, because he's got this thing called, dignity.
And then they dress up Riverwind like an old lady.
Gilthanas ends up on page 388 a little weird in that he's either suspicious of Raistlin or worrying over him. It's not clear, or maybe both. Gilthanas' suspicion of Raistlin's semi-ill-founded, but given that everyone else is doing it, he wants to be cool too. Tass, meanwhile, discovers a painting of the Dragonlance, which this is a great moment. It's on page 391 of the paperback edition of Dragonlance, Dragons of Autumn Twilight. And page 394 sees Elistan healed. Yay! And he expresses his interest in the old gods. And yeah, I'm biased towards Chrysania because I like her as a character far more than Elistan, because she at least gets a lot more characterization than Elistan. That said, Pyros, meanwhile, refuses to eat Sestoon because he's disgusted by the notion of eating a Collie Dwarf, which is funny.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah. Where it's going to get, Eben betrays the companions and is ordered to apprehend Barum and hand him over to Pyros, who subtly informs him. This is such a great quote on page 396. This is one of my favorite parts, and it's so funny. I actually think that Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman had such a devilish sense of humor here. I really love it. I understand the figure about again. And my reward will be all you deserve. He's stating outright, I'm gonna eat you or roast you or something. I love it. I'm sorry, but that is such a dark moment. You can already tell. He's not gonna survive it, no matter what. And I love that.
He deserves it.
Yeah, I know. Discover on page 397 that Tass's dad was pretty wise and said that Kender are there to do the little work and leave larger heroics to larger folk. Now, this is a direct nod to Tolkien's Hobbit stories with the Legendarium, mostly of the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, as this was essentially Tolkien's psychology. So this little moral lesson that's inspired from Lord of the Rings makes it so that we almost get a sense of a Tolkien kind of insert character in Tass's dad, which is pretty cool. Chapter 13 sees that Eben is flirting a lot with Tika, who seems to be savoring the attention. We do have, however, now this comes after Tanis chews out Eben because Eben slipped away from the rest of the party. Gilthanas had also slipped away because he was suspicious of Raistlin, and Gilthanas kind of defends his actions, saying, I was suspicious of Raistlin, and when I came back, he wasn't here. Okay, Eben slipped away, and you only have his word for. Gilthanas, you have the word of several other people, so okay, Gilthanas is eliminated as the traitor at this point. There's no way Gilthanas is the traitor, so that narrows it down to Eben and Raistlin. And the sad thing is that, of course, who becomes suspect, number one, despite all the times he's tried to give his life for the companions?
Raistlin.
You have Riverwind, who says, all have a right to speak and all have a right to respond in their own defense. The elf has spoken. Let us hear from your brother. Which, that is fair. I'll give Riverwind that much. But the problem is, even Riverwind's kind of against Raistlin. It suggests that his voice is deepened than usual, so even he's kind of going, Raistlin, anything you want to say before we pass sentence? That's basically the attitude of almost all the companions. What's funny is that Raistlin throughout the entire book has tried to defend himself every time and said no, and he's protested very vehemently in his own defense. It's only at this point that, what does he say? Why should I speak? Raistlin whispered harshly, his voice soft and lethal with hatred. None of you trust me, so why should you believe me? I refuse to answer, and you may think as you choose. If you believe I am a traitor, do away with me now. Raistlin, like I said, has been defending himself vehemently every turn of the way, but now when, I mean no offense, there is a case to be built to an extent against Raistlin. Raistlin's just saying, and by this time it's basically been, almost a dozen times a day he's suspected and accused of being a traitor, and they try to draw steel on him. After about a month of traveling with these people, he's basically saying, you're just gonna try to do away with me anyways, regardless if I'm innocent or not, regardless of the fact that I just tried to give my life away for you guys against a banshee, which is a heck of a lot more than a lot of the companions did at that time. Why should I even Eben mount a defense. You've already made up your mind. You're just going to choose Eben, even though we all know he's the traitor. Even though all evidence points to him, you're just going to accuse me, so what do I care? The funny thing is that Raistlin went from being, if you look at the stages of grief over these broken friendships, he's gone from denial to anger to an extent, maybe towards acceptance. I don't think he's had acceptance yet. He's at anger, and you're just going to come after me anyways. What do I care?
And he's getting over compromise.
He's getting what?
Compromise. That's one of the stages of grief.
Oh, yeah, where he's no longer compromising with them. Yeah, because before he would compromise with them and say, okay, well, how's this? I'm not the traitor because... And he tried to reason with them and bargain with them. Now he's saying, what's the point?
Even when I defend myself, you twist my words against me.
And then when I defend you and risk my own life and my own soul for you, you just still try to do away with me anyways and stab me in the back. So no. The sad thing about Raistlin in this trilogy is that he did not turn to darkness and evil somewhat by his own volition, but because he was pushed in that direction. The companions turned him to evil when they continuously tried to do away with him and betray him. It was almost not Raistlin's choice so much as it was the others who chose that path for him because they continuously attacked him.
The only one that didn't really verbally call him a traitor was essentially Taff.
We have the comedy scene of Tass and Fizzman deciding to rescue Sestoon, only for Fizzman to seemingly accidentally start levitating the dragon without the sleeping dragon noticing. Obviously, Paladin is still trolling. And Tass basically tells him, no, that's the wrong person. Oh, whoops. And then he levitates Sestoon. Sestoon then at first believes that it's man-eating Kender or something. It's really silly. Then recognizes his bestie. Man, I really wish Sestoon did become a permanent character. Him and Tass have such a funny bromance. Fizzman's hat, though, levitates down towards the villains, taunting them and mocking them. Weirdly, I'm of the opinion that Verminard and Pyros would not have reacted in time against the companions to properly manage the rebellion that breaks out. And that, in a way, Verminard and Pyros probably would have survived. So what Paladin is doing here is setting up the stage to eliminate Verminard and Pyros, so that he makes sure to expose himself to them. Because nothing he does is accidental. There's no way he's bumbling fool like what he presents himself to be. We have to look at him in an almost cynical manner of someone who's setting up the stage, but on the other hand, who's doing it with the best of intentions. That said, on page 403, we find out something that is honestly, I found just one of the most discouraging things in this series to find, at least before a certain scene in Dragons of Spring Dawning, is when Tanis tells Tika, take my advice, keep your sword in your scabbard, you're less dangerous that way. The reason I find that frustrating is just that I'm like, then why bring her along? There's no arc, there's no character journey, there's no progression. As she's presented in Time of the Twins, I like her. And I'm not trying to hate on Weiss and Hickman. I love them. But I just find this terribly frustrating. Tika should have gotten an arc. She should have had a character progression. Pyros is giving chase after Tass and Fizzman, who fled to Sestoon, who fled to the mechanism room. And he burns down the chain and assumes they've perished, forgetting for a minute that Fizzman is a mage. Whoops. Pyros is not the brightest bulb in the package sometimes, I guess.
No.
Tanis, in the meantime, in chapter 14, is seized by pity for Matafleur because of how old she is and wizened, which Matafleur is actually a character I really like.
Yes.
Such a dear. She's not evil. Yes, she was created by darkness, but she lost her children so that you get a strong sense, and this is where Weiss and Hickman do such a great job. They show that though Huma was right in the war against Takesis, in war it is always the little guy who suffers, or the little gal who suffers. With her, it truly is a case where no parent, no matter the situation, should ever have to bury their children. And she buried all, I think, 3 or 4 of her children. That's just sad. When Tanis goes to stand near her, seized by pity, and guaranteeing the safety and the escape of the children, the companions are exposed because Raistlin apparently only now remembers that the sword is Wormslayer and goes, oh, yeah, that's right. This dragon-slaying sword, which has for a name dragon-slaying, has this weird effect that it tends to get overexcited when around dragons. He was not being very bright here. Oops. Matafleur, though, huddles away from Tanis, utterly terrified, but then starts going delusional, because she's semi-senile. The kids initially are angry with Tanis and afraid for Matafleur, because they've adopted her as a pet dragon of sorts. They are taken away, though, by Merida, who worries for Matafleur and says, don't hurt her, forgetting for a moment that Matafleur is more dangerous than Tanis. It is funny because Sturm then turns to Tanis and says, you do realize she's going to cut you down. And once again, Raistlin volunteers to do battle to save Tanis and sacrifice himself for another campaign. Raistlin and Tanis do convince Sturm to go on ahead. Matafleur goes nuts. Problem is, she targets Pyros and Verminard after those two burst out from the fortress, deciding they were gonna... that it's not wabbit or duck season, but refugee season. I hope you gals don't mind the joke. Sturm realizes Eben is the traitor and points out that Barum, the Emerald Stone Man, with an emerald gem stone stuck in his chest. At the beginning of chapter 15, we have the fight with Verminard. And having reread this fight, I have mixed feelings about it. Raistlin's beaten back. In prequel books, Raistlin would have curb stomped Verminard, but because this is essentially a Justice League story, he has to lose to be wharfed so that Goldmoon could be built up. Even though Goldmoon just comes along and goes, "Hi!" and Takisa's bolts. It might sound weird, but I actually think that it should have been Mishgal goes, "Oh no, zoinks no!" And you have Goldmoon, "Oh, darn." But it's in turn Takisas who senses Paladin and goes, "Oh shoot!" and runs the other way. I'm not ready for this yet. I think that's how it should have gone. Because Mishakal in universe is nowhere near the power level of Takisas. In Autumn Twilight, Mishakal is probably at least 3 times more powerful than Takisas. But then in other books, this is not going to be the case. Takisas is going to be presented as more powerful than Mishakal. Mishakal's a healing goddess and a peaceful goddess, not a combat deity. Creation is much more difficult and whatnot. It necessitates more power. So Mishakal is technically more powerful than Takisas, but in combat, since she's not a warrior, Takisas has nothing to fear from her. So why is Takisas running away when she could basically go, honey, let me just go get my fun equipment for you. We're gonna have fun, honey. It should be Paladin that she takes one look at and goes, oh shoot, I remember he kicked my rear end all over Krynn last time we met, and he simply just said, here, let me bless you, Huma. And that really hurt. Ow, ow, ow. I still have the scar to prove it. I'm running. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button as though you were Kitiara in Sky trying to take down Sturm atop the High Claire's tower.